To introduce myself, I'm Gabi Zapodanu. I'm a technical marketing engineer. I am focused for the past 4 years on Cisco Data Center APIs and integrations. For those that do not know me, I am a network engineer for 25 years. About 7 years ago, I started to focus primarily on software. How do I use software to manage network infrastructure? Last 4 years, I focused only on Cisco Data Center APIs and integrations, including the integration with ServiceNow. As I mentioned, please join this room if you can. I will share the entire PDF for all the slides, including the hidden slides. I encourage to ask questions, provide comments, feedback, not only on what I'm going to present today, because there are other topics that could be of interest for you. If you have questions about data center APIs, some other integrations. I had 4-hour sessions earlier this week. You are going to have a view on what those sessions are. If there's content that is of interest for you, I can share those PDF slides with you as well. Here's what we are going to cover today. Very quickly, Cisco Data Center platform. Most of you already have Cisco Data Center production or lab. So I will cover only what's important for you to know in the context of the session today. Then we will go over a very quick overview of the ITSM integration, the architectural options we have for how to integrate between Cisco Data Center and ServiceNow. Then we'll dive in the most common use cases for the out-of-the-box integration. When I'm saying out-of-the-box integration, that is where you are going to use what we have built from an integration perspective ready for you today with little to no customization on your end. I had earlier this week a session that went through custom workflows and how to build automations running on ServiceNow that will call Cisco Data Center REST APIs. If you are interested in the PDF in the deck for that presentation, let me know. Today, we will focus on everything that we do with this integration, 3 workflows that are most common. Most customers we are seeing will start with the CMDB, the configuration management synchronization database. We'll follow with incident management, and we are going to look at some automation events. And the very common one that everybody starts, that I use in my lab, I actually use all of this in my lab basically all the time, is actually software management. Cisco Data Center obviously is a network controller that manages both physical and virtual infrastructure. And in doing this, of course, we have a lot of capabilities, a lot of automation workflows, assurance data that we collect, and most of these are available for us to consume either free integrations like custom integrations or other Cisco integrations with other platforms, or northbound through northbound REST APIs. The session today, we are going to focus on the integration with ServiceNow. Some of these APIs are available for you to build your own integrations. For example, incident enrichment. There are other APIs that you could use to build other integrations. Also, earlier this week, I had another session that covered PagerDuty Splunk and the integration with WebEx, if you are interested in those topics. At the core of the Cisco Data Center platform to consume all of these services that are available to automate workflows are the northbound REST APIs. And with the northbound REST APIs, some of these APIs are used when we build the integration with ServiceNow. We need to know all the inventory of devices that are managed by Cisco Data Center. We are going to use these APIs. We need to learn more about issues that are detected by Cisco Data Center. We use APIs to collect this information from Data Center as well. Today, we are going to use also event notifications. In this case, the channel that I will use to send event notifications would be from Cisco Data Center to ServiceNow. But we do support other notification channels. I can send notifications via webhooks. How many of you use webhooks notifications with Data Center or any of these channels for event notifications? So we have some. What I encourage you, these event notifications are near real time. In a couple of seconds after Cisco Data Center detects an issue, a notification will be sent out. They are very powerful, they are very easy to consume, either using some of these notification channels that we already have, or with ServiceNow, and you are going to see during the demos today. We have a number of integrations. I already mentioned Splunk. The one that we will focus primarily today would be obviously ServiceNow. We have integration with IPAM platforms, and the option is also to create reports that you could export in formats like Tableau if you want to import that information in some executive dashboards. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but you need to know developer resources. We invested a lot of time to build, let's say, a complete Python SDK for all the REST APIs for Cisco Data Center, an Ansible collection that includes, again, coverage for all the APIs, Terraform provider. We have learning labs, sandboxes. We have sample code. We have open source integration with Splunk, open source integration with Jenkins. We've tried to add from a developer resources to really enable developers to focus on use cases and not writing code of how to call Cisco Data Center REST APIs. So how many of you use ServiceNow today? And how many of you use other platforms like ITSM platforms, but not ServiceNow? So the same concepts would apply if you want to build integrations, like the workflows you are going to see with ServiceNow or with other platforms. The first, what we need to learn about ServiceNow, the Now platform is extremely rich. There are a lot of capabilities, and we are obviously from an IT services management perspective, we will focus only on some of the workflows that the ServiceNow platform supports. The integration from Cisco Data Center to ServiceNow will support incident management. I'm going to create incidents. I'm going to automate the process to create an incident when a network issue is detected by Cisco Data Center. Then I'm going to also be able to create problems. I'm going to create change requests when I have, for example, a need for a change approval. You're going to see a workflow that uses the change request process today, and that workflow will create a change request when I want to start a software distribution or activation. And we are going to start with the first workflow, which is configuration management database. We will synchronize everything is managed by Cisco Data Center with the asset with the CMDB table in ServiceNow. How many of you feel that you have a very good information about everything that Cisco Data Center manages in ServiceNow? And do you use this with this workflow, or did you use with the discovery from ServiceNow or manual? So I'll share with you using the ServiceNow. Basically, it will give you some of this information, but not everything. So I'm going to share with you what else you could get if you enable this synchronization. So what is the value for us? We have Cisco Data Center. Of course, we have ServiceNow. What is the value if we build this integration and we start using these new workflows? First, we are going to really simplify some of these processes. There's a network issue, I'm going to have an incident created. I don't need to focus on creating that incident. We will provide you a good start to understand what the problem is and to have visibility in what you need to do next. The same is for change control. We can prevent, let's say, software upgrades or group-based policies that may be configured that create a risk from a security policy for your organizations. Before that group-based policy will be deployed to your infrastructure, you're going to have a change request. And only when that change request is approved in ServiceNow, that's when Data Center will continue with the workflow. So there is definitely cost savings, absolutely enhanced visibility, both on Cisco Data Center, but also ServiceNow. You will have visibility in Cisco Data Center on all the incidents, change, and problems in CMDB inventory that are created with ServiceNow. And it will provide you a very good understanding of state of the incident in ServiceNow or a change request, so you know what you need to do as a network engineer managing your infrastructure. There are two options to build this integration. I will start with the first one, and this is the one that I covered a lot more this past, I think was Monday, for some of you came to my session, where we looked at custom workflows and how to customize this integration. It is the integration with all the Cisco DNA app. We are going to configure the platform and bundles, and on ServiceNow, we do not have an app. So for us to be able to send REST APIs from Cisco Data Center to ServiceNow, we need to format these REST APIs and send them to a REST API endpoint on ServiceNow. And those are REST API endpoints, are generic REST API endpoints or staging tables. So you have to configure those REST API endpoints, and we are going to provide you the information. There is no processing of this data. We don't have any options to apply any transforms. We don't have any options to receive any feedback from ServiceNow to Cisco DNS Center with anything that you do from a data processing perspective. So this is a common implementation for some customers. From some of you, I know some of you in the room, you are not allowed to install the Cisco DNA app. So for those of you, this is maybe the only option you have. We are going to provide you the same data that we would provide you with the bundles, but you have to process the data. You have to write the business rules. You have to write the code on ServiceNow to do some of the functionality or create your own workflows. Compatibility, this is important. Of course, in the ITSM integration guide, you are going to find the version of Cisco DNS Center. You are going to find the version for the ServiceNow that is compatible with. And typically, you are going to see that we support at least 3 versions. That's what ServiceNow also supports. Typically, 3 versions are always supported in production. So in this case, we are going to support 5, but we are always going to try to support the last 3. Something to know, when ServiceNow publishes a new image, they will do a software upgrade. Typically, after it goes in production, within a couple of weeks, we are going to finish the certification of our integration, and we are going to support your efforts to integrate with the new version of ServiceNow. So be aware, it might be a couple of weeks after ServiceNow releases a software version. The other option, the one that we are going to use today for the remaining of the presentation, this is what we will focus on, is how to integrate with the Cisco DNA app. So yes, we have an app on ServiceNow that we need to integrate with and needs to be installed on ServiceNow. The REST API calls will be made to these API endpoints that we publish. We are going to process the data, and we are going to implement all the workflows you are going to see. So what happens if ServiceNow needs to communicate back to Cisco DNS Center? ServiceNow is in the cloud. DNS Center is likely in your data center. There isn't any way for this communication to happen. I don't think anybody is going to open firewall rules to allow inbound communication from a SaaS platform to your data center. I know some of you are smiling. Even thinking that this wouldn't make sense, right? So what we do is we support a Meet server. This is a solution from ServiceNow. It is on-prem, it's virtual, will connect to ServiceNow, will register to your ServiceNow. It opens a secure communication channel from inside to outside, and in that way, typically no firewall rules are required. In that way, the REST APIs from ServiceNow to DNS Center will be channeled through this communication channel, and in that way, DNS Center receives back important information from ServiceNow. You are going to see some of these messages. Important to note, I have throughout the presentation notes. These are tips of what you should pay attention when you configure this integration. Things that may be important, or maybe they are not extremely well documented or not very visible in documentation. So in this case, we do not basically manage this Meet server. The Meet server is something that ServiceNow manages. It does updates, upgrades. You can reboot the server from ServiceNow. You have a dashboard of how much CPU utilization. Everything you need to do with this Meet server or Meet servers will be part of the ServiceNow platform. Also be aware, there could be that your organization already has a Meet server. You do not need a dedicated one for the integration with Cisco DNS Center. If you have a Meet server that doesn't have high CPU utilization, it's fine. You can add Cisco DNS Center messaging through that Meet server. Do you know how many Meet servers, or if you have any in your organizations? Very likely, how many? Yeah, so that's very common. I have customers, they have over 20 Meet servers. We don't need a dedicated one. If you want to have a dedicated one, it's absolutely fine, but you don't need one. From a compatibility perspective, be aware that you have the version of DNS Center, you have the version of ServiceNow, and you have the version of the app. And there is a second compatibility. What if I want to upgrade to a version of the app that maybe has newer features, we release new capabilities? Then in that situation, you can go to ServiceNow, identify the Cisco DNA app, identify all the versions we support, and the ServiceNow versions. And then in that way, you will know if you can, for example, a specific software version, a newer version of the Cisco DNA app is compatible with a specific version of ServiceNow. Something else that sometimes is missed, we have here information regarding how to install, how to configure the app. For your convenience, after the session today in the WebEx room, I'm going to provide you both the Cisco ITSM integration guide, but also the installation basically of the app and the configuration of the app. Because those documents, for some reason, sometimes are missed. I have worked on attack cases. I was asked in escalations where something was not configured because we were not aware about the installation of the app and what is required to configure. To install the app, you need your ServiceNow admin to do this installation for you. So it's good to know your ServiceNow administrators. It's good to build a relationship, work on this project together, because you will need them and they will need you as well. And the installation takes only a few minutes. The upgrade of the app follows exactly the same process. I want to decide to upgrade to a new version. Everything is done from ServiceNow. I talked about Meet Server. I have a few other slides for Meet Servers. I think I'm sharing my experience in working troubleshooting cases, helping the TAC engineers with their TAC cases. This is important to know. You can install the Meet Server on Windows or Linux. I have it in my environment Linux, or you can do it on Docker container. The instructions are very good. There is a wizard of step-by-step how to install this Meet Server. It might be good for you to be aware. Again, you need to work with your ServiceNow admin through this process. You are going to have a dashboard, for example, in ServiceNow to have visibility on CPU, to have visibility in memory utilization, and also status. It's very important because you, as network engineer managing Cisco DNA Center, need to be aware if the ServiceNow is up and operational. If you don't see comments and status updates from ServiceNow, this is the very first thing you need to go. Is actually the server, the Meet server, still up and operational? And from here, you can upgrade, you can pause, you can delete, you can do all the operations that are required with this Meet server. There are a few controller properties you need to be aware. For example, this is after you install the Cisco DNA app, the DNA controller, this is where you configure how ServiceNow will reach to DNA Center. There are only a few things that you need to do. For example, provide the IP address of your Cisco DNA Center cluster, a password, and user ID. I recommend you create a password, user ID, an account for ServiceNow to connect back to Cisco DNA Center, and a Meet server. This has been pre-populated for me because I have only a Meet server for both Cisco DNA Center clusters that I integrated with ServiceNow. After you are doing this, basically you are almost done with everything that you need to configure on ServiceNow to be able to communicate back to Cisco DNA Center. You are telling ServiceNow, I want to communicate with this DNA Center cluster, and this is the Meet server you should send the REST API calls to be forwarded to Cisco DNA Center. There are a couple of other configurations. First, some customers, some of you are interested, hey, I do not want to create a new incident if the device is not managed by DNA Center. Let's say you have a lab, you don't want to create incidents in ServiceNow, or maybe the service provider that manages your ServiceNow instance doesn't want to receive incidents because in the lab you have some devices you are playing with. And for that reason, you have the option to say, I don't want, if the device is not fully managed by Cisco DNA Center, to create incidents. If it's not in the inventory, I'm sorry, because that device that is not in the inventory, maybe it's not synchronized with ServiceNow, then you are not going to create an incident for devices that maybe are not fully onboarded yet, and you are not in production with them. And there's another check mark if you are interested to collect extended debugging on ServiceNow. It's recommended by ServiceNow not to enable that unless if you need to. And that's pretty much it on the Cisco DNA app. Configure how to reach Cisco DNA controller. The other options are not mandatory. One or the other, there are some defaults. You don't need to touch them. On Cisco DNA, there are some configuration on the controller, on the Cisco DNA Center. You need to tell exactly the same. How do I connect to ServiceNow? you need to create what I would suggest on ServiceNow, a password and user ID that Cisco DNA Center will communicate with. And of course, you are going to be able to, in the integration, in the Cisco DNA Center settings and destinations, decide that I'm going to integrate to ServiceNow. I'm going to provide the destination. This is my vendor instance in my lab, and then password user ID. Once you do this, that's how you configure the destination, basically the access to your ServiceNow instance. And you could have multiple ones, because maybe you want right now your Cisco DNA Center cluster, you are playing with your sandbox in ServiceNow, so you are going to have a destination. Maybe when you go in production, you are going to configure another destination, another access settings, because now you are going to connect to a different instance of ServiceNow. So here are the use cases that will be covered today. We are going to talk about the CMDB sync. We are going to cover the incident management and change management. Be aware that all of this, what I'm going to present to you, requires the Cisco DNA app, because we are going to process this data, we are going to make the workflows, we are going to update tables on ServiceNow, and we are going to send you information from ServiceNow to Cisco DNA Center. There are a couple of other change requests. I already mentioned about group-based policy. We have the ability that if I want to create a new group-based policy access in ServiceNow, in DNA Center, I want to create a change request. And we can automate that process. The same is with Fabric configurations. For example, I want to create exactly the same type of change request if I'm adding a new, let's say, edge in a Fabric, or I'm changing a configuration, removing, let's say, a border node from a Fabric configuration. Every time before DNA Center completes these workflows, we'll wait for ServiceNow, for the change control manager, to approve those processes, and that approval process will be sent to Cisco DNA Center, and then DNA Center will continue with the workflow the time it is scheduled to complete. So let's start with the first one. Is anybody here using the CMDB synchronization, the configuration management database synchronization? I know you have some information, but you are not using this. This workflow will enable us to collect all the information from Cisco DNA Center, all the devices that are managed by Cisco DNA Center, and synchronize this information with the CMDB table, and from there, the asset table will receive the information regarding these devices. We are going to configure the bundle, schedule the sync. When the CMDB sync is started, then we are going to update information in the CMDB table in ServiceNow. We are going to verify this information. You are going to actually see the information we sent to ServiceNow, and then we will have visibility in the runtime dashboard, platform runtime dashboard, about what happened, how many devices we synchronized. So let's take a look at this workflow. I need to configure the bundle for the CMDB synchronization, and configuring this bundle, I have the option to select an existing instance. You remember in the destination settings, I configured a destination for ITSM. I could use that one that I already configured, or I can create a new one. In my case, I can use an existing one, and then I will define, that's the access settings for that instance. I will define where do I want to send these records, because we have, let's say, 1,000 devices managed by Cisco DNA Center. I need to update the CMDB table with 1,000 records for these devices. And I'm going to decide where do I want to send them. I'll select my instance. And then in the past, we had sometimes situations where we would have tag cases and issues where we wouldn't have the app configured or installed, but customers would enable the CMDB synchronization and it wouldn't work. Now we are going to ask you a question. Do you have the Cisco DNA app installed? Because the workflow, if you have the app installed, like what we are doing now here, and the workflow when you do not have the app installed are different. So you answer yes, and then we are going to be asked, where do I want to send this data? We are going to send it by default. This is the default configuration, the recommendation. If you want not to do any customizations, these are the best practices. We are going to send it to the CMDB inventory directly. We have the option to send it to a staging table, but that's not the scope of this presentation. We can see here that because we are sending to our app, this destination, this REST API endpoint is pre-populated for us. You cannot change this. Don't try to change it. The reason it's not, you are not able to change it because this is what out of the box the Cisco DNA app will allow you to send data to this REST API endpoint. We have a few more steps. Be aware there are some mandatory parameters. I have been also in some calls and troubleshooting situations where some of these mandatory parameters may not be available in some Cisco DNA Center clusters. And for that reason, those devices will not be synchronized with ServiceNow. There are a number of different parameters that will be sent to Cisco DNA, from Cisco DNA Center to ServiceNow. Also be aware that some of these are attributes, some of them are references. It's beyond the scope of this presentation to discuss the difference between those two. What I suggest always is when you start first time with this integration, send all the parameters, leave all the defaults, don't change anything, and then you can start customize what parameters you want, what you do not want in ServiceNow. And then this is another important step. This is what we pre-populate. This is what is in my instance when I'm configuring. What you see here is in my lab. Every time that we are starting to configure this synchronization, there will be a step where we need to define routers or switches or access points are mapped to CI classes. Those are type of devices that ServiceNow understands and knows how to map in their CMDB, in their tables. So in this case, this is already pre-populated. For most of you, 90% of time, you are going to have all of these maps between device families and classes, the CI classes already available for you. But if you have one missing, for example, for switches, is not there, you need to add a CI class to pick up one that is already available in ServiceNow and use it here. Source discovery, I know there are a lot of steps in this. Trust me, the other workflows are easier, quicker to configure, but the source discovery is another recommended step. This is not mandatory. If you do not want to use a source discovery, I'll define what a source discovery is. You do not have to create one. In ServiceNow, when we update records to this table, to the CMDB table, we are going to have the ability to define what is the platform, the application that is the source of these records. So in our case, in ServiceNow, I created source discoveries for my Cisco DNA Center. I would recommend for you to do the same. In that way, you will very quickly identify in your CMDB who was the platform, the source of this information. Do you know in your asset table or CMDB table how many records you have in ServiceNow? I'm not going to ask you, Benoit, because do you know even how many you have? There could be hundreds of thousands of records, millions of records. So if you want to find the 6,000 devices that Cisco DNA Center manages, in that table would be rather difficult. It's much easier if you have a discovery source for your DNA Center. If you have multiple clusters, I would recommend have one for each cluster. In my case, I have 2 clusters. I have 2 discovery sources. We don't need to go in all the details. The application installation and configuration guide includes all the details of how to configure the discovery sources, and your admin accounts, administrators of ServiceNow would be it's very easy for them to help you with these steps. Then a recommendation, how many devices we want to include with each REST API call. For typical environments, if I send 100 devices, one API call to update the CMDB table, then next 100 with another REST API works for most customers. You can increase this number, but recommendation is to stay with 100. If you need maybe lower, but typically it works. The best practice is to maintain the default of 100. And you have a summary. You can see here, for example, the inventory data fields everything that we send to ServiceNow, and you are going to see it also in next few screenshots. It is a long process. There are quite a bit of steps, but I hope This presentation will make it very easy for you to follow each step. If you follow the best practices, the defaults, it's going to be very easy to build this integration to configure the CMDB synchronization. Next, I'm going to have to schedule. So right now, what I did, I configured how and where I'm going to send the CMDB data, the inventory from Cisco DNA Center to the CMDB table. Next, I need to configure this workflow. I need to run it because it will not, so far I just did, I configure where I want to send the data and how I want to send it, but I need to actually configure the workflow. So I'm going to schedule this. I have few options. Run now, it will run immediately. That's what you are going to see in the demo. Or I can run on a schedule, and it will run daily. This is how I have it in my lab. Every day, it will run once. It is at 9 p.m., takes about 11, 12 seconds, and all the inventory, the 13 devices, very impressive number of devices, will be updated to ServiceNow. I know customers, some of you that probably have thousands of devices. I know some of you have multiple Cisco DNA Center clusters, and this synchronization will take obviously longer, but it will complete basically every evening. You are going to have information about the devices updating in ServiceNow. On Cisco DNA Center, we have the ability to look at how many devices we synchronized, we sent to ServiceNow, have been updated on ServiceNow, and every time when this workflow executed in the last, let's say, 7 days. We have also a REST API that allows us to obtain the same information. In the CMDB table, I can search in the filter CMDB_CI list, and after that, I will be able to identify, if you look here at the top, a discovery source. This is where discovery sources are very powerful because I'm going to decide, don't give me all the records, could be hundreds of thousands of records. Give me only what is discovered, what's sent by my DNA Center cluster. In this case, it's my lab DNA Center cluster. And this is the information about the devices. You can see when they were updated last time, information regarding each of these devices, the switch, the management IP address. You are going to see here some of the information that is provided, the host name, model number, serial number, model of the switch, again, the role. Just a second. So some of the information that you see here is not information that you can find it from the running configuration of the device. The running configuration of the device doesn't have information regarding, for example, the role of a device, doesn't have if it's access, distribution, if it's part of a fabric. That information just doesn't exist. So when you do this synchronization with Cisco DNA Center, we are going to include information that is not part of the running configuration that may not be discovered by other automation tools that you already have available. Yes?
What is the unique key identifier?
Yes.
Between the NAC and
yeah, so very important to know. As far as Cisco DNA Center is concerned, there are two unique identifiers. I think I know what your question means. The first one that you need to be very well aware is the unique identifier for every device on DNA Center. When we add a device to DNA Center will assign a unique identifier. And this is the unique identifier that we use for that device. So anytime I have an incident, anytime I have something that is changed, maybe the host name of the device changed, the unique identifier will not be changed. There is a second unique identifier that is used for some other workflows between, let's say, asset table and the CMDB table. And that unique identifier is used for example, for endpoint attribute retrieval. And we use the serial number for that because that's an immutable parameter, will not change for a device. Very important to remember, the device unique identifier in this case is what DNA Center uses to send to ServiceNow. So if you change the host name of a device, if you move it to another location, if anything that is changing with that device, that unique identifier will not change. And as long as that device will be in the inventory of DNA Center, it will be provided to you, and the host name will change, the location, the address will change for that device, but the same record will just be updated.
What if you do an RMA in a DNA Center? What if you do an RMA in DNA Center?
Yeah, so that's a lot longer conversation. For an RMA on DNA Center, some of these records will still be in service now because, for example, I may have an incident on this that was created 6 months ago. Removing this from service now would create some problems for some of those events. We need to hear from you what would be the best way to handle. We are looking to mark those devices that have been RMA'd as inactive. So in that way, you still have all the records provided, but not to be basically in service now, removed from service now. Right now, what will happen if you have an RMA, the last updated time, there is one here, it will stop to increment. So you are going to see devices in your table that have been, let's say, last time updated was 6 months ago because you had an RMA. But we currently do not delete any devices from the CMDB inventory. So let's look at the...
If the device already exists in service now, and does not have the instance ID, the unique identifier, will it create a new one, duplicate it?
No. If it exists and doesn't have the unique identifier, we wouldn't know how to handle that. So we will create, because you could have, technically, it's not recommended, you could have multiple devices having the same host name because you do an RMA. So technically, we don't look at the host name as being unique. So let's look at this quick demo, and then we'll continue, we'll try to go on. For example, from a CMDB perspective, we can see here that I'm going to run this workflow. I'm going to run it on demand. Typically, again, recommendation is schedule it, and then you don't need to worry. Every basically night, it will complete. So for example, here I'm going to see that I already completed, took about 12 seconds. The average is exactly 12 seconds, 367 for the last 7 days. So it's very, very fast. Of course, I have a very, very small environment. And after refreshing, we can see that I had 13 devices that I sent to ServiceNow and have been synchronized. If we go to the CMDB CI list, we are going to see here that I can basically group by the discovery source and be able to identify, for example, very quickly, one cluster has 2 devices, the other has 13. I can browse only the devices that I just updated. You can see here the last updated time. This is the parameter that will stop incrementing because DNA Center doesn't manage that device, so it will not update that device any longer. That's how you could identify those devices today. And this is the information regarding the devices. In the Other Attributes tab, we are going to provide you, for example, the address, the floor, the role of the device, when we upgraded this device last time, model number, serial number. Next, we have a couple of more workflows. We'll start with network incident. We want to automate the process when Cisco DNA Center understands, recognizes, identifies I have network issues to create an incident, problem, or change on ServiceNow. Most implementation, that's the workflow I'm going to completely show you today, is to create incidents. I know for some customers, for some events, you do not want to create an incident, maybe you want to create a problem, and that is certainly supported as well. This workflow requires the Cisco DNA app, and you need to have that configured, obviously installed, to support everything you are going to see here. We need to configure the bundle. We need to subscribe to events. I don't expect, nor should I recommend, that when you enable this workflow, you subscribe to all the events that you have in your Cisco DNA Center. It could get very noisy. Depends on your environment, how large it is. You need to be selective. You need to select first some events, test, be comfortable, and then you add more and more events so you would have a good picture about what's critical for you, what's important. We are going to create a new incident in ServiceNow. We are going to send updates, and then you are going to have full visibility in Cisco DNA Center in a runtime dashboard about everything that is going on ServiceNow. Again, from a configuration perspective, in this case, I'm going to configure the network issue monitor and enrichment. I'm going to select an existing instance, or I can create a new one. Remember, in destination, I have an ITSM configuration, so I'm going to use that one. Now I'm going to decide where do I want to send. It's exactly the same like with the CMDB sync. I have the destination, the access settings for ServiceNow. Now I need to decide where do I send this information. And in this case, we have few options. I have the option, and the default one is to select REST API endpoint. This is what we publish with the Cisco DNA app. It's the out-of-the-box integration. If you need to send to a generic REST API endpoint, I have this session with all the details how to send to a generic REST API endpoint. The URI, this is the API endpoint, is different comparing with the previous one. It will be pre-populated for you. You cannot change this. So I configure the access settings for ServiceNow. I configure where I'm sending the information to ServiceNow is the default, which is I'm going to update records in the incident table. And then I need to define subscribe to events. In my lab, I have 192 events I could subscribe with the ITSM destination. I have 175 collected. But I also have the ability to customize some of this. So for example, maybe the default for interface connecting network devices needs to be changed. In your environment, it needs to be a severity 1 or maybe a lower severity. You can change that. Also, you can change the workflow. Instead of being the default, which is create an incident in ServiceNow, you can maybe create a problem, or you can create a request change. And you are going to see that with these changes, it will be very easy. If you look here in ServiceNow, in the Cisco DNA Center runtime dashboard, that I created incidents, problems, and RFCs. So it's very easy. For some incidents, for some issues, I want to create an incident. For some issues, maybe I want to create a problem. For some, maybe for some reason, we don't need that notification, so I'm not going to subscribe at all to them. So everything is customizable. It has a lot of value because it could help you to map to your existing ITSM processes. So if I create a new incident, this is what you are going to have. The Cisco DNA tab is a tab that you are going to see quite a bit. When we install the app, this tab will be added to your records, requests, changes, problems, or incidents. And this includes additional information, like the Cisco DNA Center cluster that sends this record. Why is this important? Because we do support multiple Cisco DNA Center clusters integrations to ServiceNow. We need to know if ServiceNow communicates back to DNA Center, to which DNA Center am I going to send information to. Then we are going to have information regarding the devices that are collected. For example, if I need to create a new problem, would look very similar. An issue, a notification for an event settings now will create a new problem. If I need to create a change request, it would be very similar as well. So it is up to you to decide what kind of workflow you want. But for the session today, I'm going to cover the next few steps for the incident because that's the most common workflow that we are seeing with our customers. So for example, I have here a network issue. The interface connecting network devices is down. And then we can see in the runtime dashboard that I have a record. I actually have 3 for network interface is down issues. I think it was in the last 6 hours. If we continue to drill down to get more details about that type of issue, we can see I had 3 of them, and some important information that you should be aware that will help you understand exactly what happens between Cisco DNS and ServiceNow. Source and destination. What was the last message in the exchange of updating this incident? It was from ServiceNow to DNA Center. This is good, which means that ServiceNow is able to communicate with DNA Center. You are going to have the information about, okay, it was an incident created. State is new, which means nobody picked up this incident, and I can, if I'm the network engineer looking at this issue, I can decide, I'm going to click on the URL for this issue, for this incident, and start to work on this issue, on this incident. If I click on that URL, I end up on the incident. I have the Cisco DNA tab to provide me more details, and I have a description of what's going on. The DNA tab includes information, again, the DNA center, the topology. This is important because you could very quickly identify, well, this is a core switch. I have an issue on a core switch and I have a lot of devices that could be impacted. Or maybe it's just an access point. You can find out the topology, what are all the other network devices that are connected to this device. You are going to have information regarding suggested actions. How do we recommend to troubleshoot this issue? And if you came to the session on the advanced workflows, I created a very simple workflow automation that allows me to type commands in ServiceNow to any of these devices or any devices that are managed by Cisco Data Center and collect the output of those commands in ServiceNow. So this will help you identify which device you need to troubleshoot or what are the other devices that could be impacted by this issue. I will change in progress because I'm going to pick up this incident. I'm the network engineer. I'm going to troubleshoot this issue, and then I'm going to update Cisco DNA Center because I marked this issue in progress. So here is what, for an event history, everything you are going to learn in Cisco DNA Center. For this issue, you are going to see that first communication was from Cisco Data Center ServiceNow. Then we got the incident number back from ServiceNow. Then I marked it in progress. Then I marked it in hold. And then I resolved it on ServiceNow. So at this point, having this information, maybe I can resolve the issue in DNA Center, or maybe it has been already resolved. This exchange gives you the information about when the severity of the issue has been changed, the state of the issue, the incident in ServiceNow. This is very powerful for us because it helps us to have in Cisco DNA Center visibility of what's going on in ServiceNow with this record. Could be incident, change request, or problem. So let's do a quick demo for this. We can see I have no critical issues currently, so I'm going to create one. For those that came to my sessions in the past, I have a number of applications that I develop, scripts that will turn off interfaces, disable power supplies, basically shut down adjacencies for routing protocols, disconnect access points. This is how I create the issues for testing. I don't go to any device for creating any issues. We can see in a couple of seconds after the refresh that I already have basically a new issue that has been detected by Cisco DNA Center. And that is, of course, we know it's an interface connecting network devices is down. It impacts a border router. Runtime dashboard, the platform runtime dashboard is very powerful for you because you learn about all the ITSM workflows, how many API calls are made to DNA Center. Everything you need to know about what we are talking today is in the runtime dashboard. So from there, we are coming to the incident. We see it's new. We have a brief description of the problem. We can click on the Cisco DNA tab, and that's when we get more information about everything that we learned from Cisco DNA Center. All of this information, topology, suggested actions, the device that is impacted, everything has been packaged and sent to ServiceNow through API calls when we created this incident. Exactly the same information will be sent from Cisco Data Center to ServiceNow with a custom workflow to send this to a generic REST API table. I'm going to mark this in progress and reduce the severity, and then I can do some troubleshooting. You can see that I'll go on hold, and I will update. Every time I change the status of the incident, I will send an update back with REST APIs to Cisco DNA Center. Who can tell me how do I send these REST APIs from ServiceNow to DNA Center? Not you, I'm sorry. Thank you. Exactly. So we have that mid server. So one tip, if those updates do not come from ServiceNow to DNA Center, that's your first thing. Check the mid server. If I am helping a customer with a problem, this is the first thing. Is the mid server even up and registered in operation? And if it is, then we look for other things. But very common, the mid server has a problem. So you can see here the updated information, when it happened, what occurred, when was the message sent from which platform to which one. Yes?
Maybe I'm getting this wrong, but don't you think it's not a good idea to have information on both systems, have a DNA and on ServiceNow?
Yeah, so it is a good idea to have information on both. The best idea would be if it would be completely synchronized. But I need to have information on DNA Center about the state of the incident in ServiceNow. As well, I need to have information on ServiceNow about basically the incident, the records, everything. Currently, if I'm coming to Cisco DNA Center, I need to know, well, this incident, if I'm the network engineer, is on hold. Somebody already did troubleshooting. There's nothing for me to be aware, work on that incident because I will take one that is new. So in that way, it would be easier for me as a network engineer to decide which issue I need to work. I look at the severity. Well, this is a severity 1. I'll pick it up. I look at if this information is missing. I don't know if I created an incident or not. I need to go to ServiceNow, find the incident, see if anyone was created, and if none was created, I need to create one by hand. So it's good to have this information and to give you as many details we can, because if you see the state of that, you know somebody else worked on this issue versus having no information if the issue is being handled. So we have one more workflow. I'll try to make it in time. I'll move a little bit quicker. I'm sorry for this. It's a lot of information that I think is very relevant, but this workflow you are going to see is very, very similar. In this case, I want to create change requests when I'm starting a software image upgrade, or if I'm creating a change in a fabric, or I add a new group-based policy. Why is this important? Because these changes could be very significant. Let's say if I remove the border node in a fabric, what do you think would be happening in your environment? Probably nothing good, right? The same is if I create a change policy for a group-based policy that will be basically enabling, I said earlier this week, the contractors to have access to any servers that they shouldn't have access. So for some of these changes, we want a policy to be approved, the change to be approved in ServiceNow by a change control manager before we implement them. So in this case, I will do a software image compliance. I'll identify very quickly through the compliance what are the devices that are not compliant from an image perspective. For those that you are not aware, in DNA Center now I can schedule a maintenance window which will suppress all the notifications from that device during the maintenance window. I'm going to start to schedule the image upgrade. That will create a change request. When approved, we'll send information to Cisco DNA Center, and that will trigger basically will allow DNA Center to complete the software distribution and activation at the time is scheduled. So be aware, this change approval may go today at 11 o'clock, but if the scheduled time for this software distribution is Friday evening at 7 p.m., that's when DNA Center will send that image, will start the distribution of that software. So let's take a look from a configuration perspective. You are already familiar, the access settings. I'm going to define which is the ServiceNow instance I want to use. Destination would be the default one, the REST API endpoint. That's the default for the Cisco DNA Center app. The URI is going to be, again, defined for me. I cannot actually change that API endpoint. And then I'll go through the process, the typical process. I'm going to select a device. It's not running the golden image. And I'm going to do a software upgrade. I'll go next. We have some pre-checks before we do the software distribution. I will approve to do those pre-checks. And in my case, I don't want to do the activation. For probably, I have very high confidence that a lot of you would be the same. You are going to do the software distribution, and you are going to do the reboot, the reload of the device in the maintenance window. And when I do this, basically, we'll continue with a schedule. So for example, in this case, because I have the ITSM integration enabled, it is very recommended, and actually you cannot change this time for shorter than 10 minutes. You need to provide the later time to be scheduled because you need to be able to receive the approval back from ServiceNow for DNA Center to continue the process. And then basically you are submitting this. What will happen if you go in Cisco DNA Center in the tasks, you are going to see that now you actually have basically a ticket pending, which means you will be able to identify that this change the software upgrade is waiting on an approval. Once that approval is provided, we will continue with the software activation. Where do we go if we need to find out about an ITSM workflow? We go to the runtime dashboard. So here we can see that I have a stream upgrade that requested a change control. From there, we will find out more information. If I'm the network engineer, I will find out here that I have a change request, again, the message exchanges, and the information about the change request number. From this link that we provided to you here, we are going to identify the change request, the state, all the stages that it needs to go through, and also information about the software running on device and the software that will be installed will be distributed on the device. Exactly the same information, actually is not exactly, but very similar information is if I create a change request to activate the image. Because at that time, the activation means I want to reload the device. Software distribution means I just want to distribute the software to the device. So in this case, I need to approve it. I have an approval field. I am the change control manager in my environment, so it's easy for me to approve. But I still approve. Typically, I was talking with some of you, when I do a software upgrade, I see I need to do a software upgrade. I book it for, let's say I create a change request Thursday. I approve it within 10 minutes, but it will be done Saturday morning when I don't need it for lab work or for any demo. So it's very easy to change, approve this, and then DNA Center will do the software distribution activation when it is scheduled, not when you approved actually the ticket. I will go to the schedule state, assign to a team, network, and then implement. Very, very important. You are not going to receive an approval from ServiceNow to DNA Center until this change is in implement state. So you have to go through all the steps and be sure that the change approval manager will go to the implement state. At that time, we are going to see the status change to implement, and the ticket will show approved. So I know there are a lot of steps. This is just a reference for you. I think it's important information to understand all of these steps. I know it's a lot of content, but I thought it's important to have all of these details. Maybe there are a lot of details, maybe too many details. So this time what will happen, Cisco DNA Center will start the software distribution at the time that is scheduled. You can see here, for example, the software distribution was started. It will take whatever, a few minutes till that distribution is done. Something very important, when with this workflow, okay, Cisco DNA Center sent the software to the device, and it completed distributing that software to the device. At that point, we are going to go back to ServiceNow and close this change request. So you don't have to manually go to ServiceNow to close it. In this case, because we know it was successful, in ServiceNow, we completed this change, and we are going to mark it closed. So in that way, if you go to ServiceNow or you go to Cisco DNA Center, you are going to see the state being in sync. You are going to see closed on Cisco DNA Center. It completed successfully, and you are going to see it completely successful here. I'll take questions at the very end, if you don't mind. Thank you. So let's look at this demo, and then we'll close this. You are going to see at least till the session is over, the beginning of the demo. I will upload all of these demos to the WebEx room, so you are going to have all the demos. So for example, in this case, I selected the devices that are not compliant. We can see here from a non-compliant perspective, software version 17.6.1, golden image, that's the image I'm going to distribute. Cisco DNA Center will distribute to this device. The golden image is device and site related. So for a specific type of device, a specific site, you have the option to define what is your golden image. I'm going to go through the process to schedule this. I'm going to skip the activation. If you decide later to come back and say, hey, I want to schedule this activation, a new change request will be created, and you have to approve that. So let's say I do the software distribution today, it could be 5 p.m., but the reload of the device will be tomorrow, 7 p.m. I need to create an activation task, and that will create a new change request in ServiceNow that I need to approve. And that's a common practice. We can see here that basically I have one device that is scheduled, and if I go in tasks, you are going to see the ticket being pending. Is it hard? Is it too much? I'm sorry, I have a lot of details, but I felt this is important to have every step so you know what will happen if you follow these workflows. So we can see here, for example, the change request. I can browse and open that change request. In typical process, I can, for example, in this case, see all the stages that you would have to go through. Cisco DNA tab provides us more information. If I'm the change control manager, I would ask for more details. Why do we need to do this upgrade? What is the backup plan? What is the risk if we don't do this upgrade? All of those information can be added by basically the network engineer to the incident to the change that we created. So in this case, I will go through the process, I will schedule it, and as soon as I do schedule, I have the option to approve it or reject it. So what would happen if I don't do anything with this change request? Anybody guesses? What would happen? Nothing, exactly. Not receiving an approval or decline means the NA Center has not heard back, so I'm not going to do anything. The NA Center will cancel this job, this task, because, well, it wasn't approved. I did not receive an approval. So we can see here it's in implement stage, and we can take a look, and you are going to see the task shows that it has been approved. So I'll let this go on. There was another question. The configuration item. The configuration item is a class, so we know what is the device because we created a change request with that device. We'll talk after the session. Yes.
Possible to distinguish a change, say, for example, this class of changes wanted to go into a class in ServiceNow which are auto-approved. Is it possible to
not out of the box. It could be possible, but not out of the box.
So I can't enrich and say it will always go to the network team.
You can, everything you see that we have here can be, you can build business rule to change this policy. So if you want to add something, you can. So before you go, thank you so much for coming here. It is very much appreciated. If you are interested, we have a drawing. You can enter to win a gift card. It's going to be one question, actually 2 questions. The second one is if you want to receive any emails from Cisco. So you have the option to enter for this drawing. There's going to be a very easy question, not about what we talked today. You are going to be entered in a drawing that will be only for Cisco DNA Center sessions, the ones I had this week. And I think the odds are pretty good. Very important, I will post this in the WebEx room. Actually, I'll do it. So very important, please complete the surveys. It's very important for me to hear from you. You have the option to provide comments also in the WebEx room or directly to me. Surveys are one way for me to know what I need to improve, what we need to change, if the content is relevant, if we need to add more of this content, or if too much detail or not enough detail. Hopefully it's enough detail today. Thank you so much. It is a privilege to present to you. I hope you enjoyed the session and you have a great remaining of Cisco Live.